Hi everyone! So remember last time we talked about time in the opening. We've already talked about some generic principles and now it's time to look at real games where we can apply those principles for real. Let's start! Third piece of advice is to castle as fast as possible. On the king's side it's usually quicker and safer, and in the next example Black plays too many pawn moves and gets punished. All these are real games from beginners, but real games nonetheless. e4, e5, again, you start to know this opening, but there are other possibilities, of course. Knight to f3, d6, this well-known pawn move known as the Philidor defense, a bit passive. White continues with d4 to gain some space in the center. And then Black plays f5, which is really uncompromising. It weakens this king. Here on this diagonal again is exposed, but at the same time it's an attacking move on e4. If you're in an aggressive mood, you can play this. And then bishop c4, very good move by White to control this diagonal. This beautiful diagonal here. And then Black makes a mistake and captures on e4. And you know, it's the fourth pawn move in a row. Black has neglected his king's safety, so this is really dangerous. And now this is very unpleasant for Black, because if Black captures here, White goes on h5 with the queen and then recaptures on e5, and then it's either a checkmate or very good material compensations for White. So Black plays actually what is the best move in this position, d5, blocking this diagonal, but this is not enough, as you will see, because White plays queen h5, check. Black plays the king to e7, because if we go back a little bit, if Black moves the pawn here, then White captures with the knight and Black cannot recapture with the h7 pawn, because then White would capture the rook. So Black plays the king on e7. And now you see that things have gone really bad for Black, because the queen is now in the middle of Black's position. Only move, king on d6, so it's never a good sign if your king has to go so far away in the opening. White captures with the queen on d5, king back to e7, and then a very good move, knight to g6, check. And actually the only goal of this move is to clear this e5 square for the queen. So this is just a beautiful clearance sacrifice. And now what happens? Black captures. Here we are, the queen delivers a check on e5. Black plays the bishop on e6. White captures, and this is a checkmate. Another example where Black plays the queen very carelessly, and we see how Black gets punished. Well, it all starts with a very normal opening for both sides. White plays d4, knight to f6, and this is not the same as playing d5, but the idea is quite similar. It's to control the e4 square so that White cannot push the e2 pawn on e4. So a really good move, really. White plays knight to f3, Black continues with e6, perfectly good. Bishop to g5, so pinning this knight on f6, because else the bishop would capture this queen on d8. c6, maybe a bit too solid. You can play d5 right away or another move, but why not? Now e4, and again, because this knight is pinned, it cannot capture, of course, this pawn on e4. The threat is to put this pawn on e5, which can be annoying because currently this knight is pinned. So Black then has a bad idea. Try to remove the pin and also to win a pawn. With queen b6, this knight is no longer pinned, which is a good thing. And also black threatens b2, a capture on b2. And this will be a good illustration of why time matters in the opening, because by capturing this pawn on b2, black will lose a lot of time. And we will see that ultimately it won't be good for black. So how does white address this threat? Black plays the knight to d2, and white simply ignores the threat. The bet is that taking the pawn will put black in a difficult position because black will lose precious time taking the pawn. Let's see what happens. Black captures the pawn. Then white continues developing, bishop on d3. Black plays d5, white castles. Okay. We can see that the king is safe. All white's pieces are nicely placed. And on the other hand, black still has many pieces on the starting square. So this black is clearly behind in development here. So it's time to attack the queen on b2 for white. That's why black has to spend another move to bring the queen back to a safe square. White continues developing the queen on e2. This is good. Black captures the pawn in the center on e4. White recaptures on e4. And here black tries to exchange as many pieces as possible, because usually when you have less space, it's easier if you exchange some pieces. So that's what black is basically trying to do here. Queen to e4. Then black wants to develop the knight, which is natural. c4, a good developing move, maybe threatening g5 at some point. And then black plays h6, which seems quite good, but in fact it is a terrible mistake. The point I want to make here is that, of course, black could have played perfect moves here and could have survived from this position. But when you have a bad position, it's usually much easier to make mistakes. And this game is a very strong example of this. So now the question is, do you see why h6 is such a bad move? Because white has a beautiful tactical combination here, which starts with queen e6, a queen sacrifice. Black really has no other choice than recapture, and then bishop to g6, checkmate. And we see that with this pawn on h6, this g6 square was no longer controlled, and moving the pawn to h6 was in fact weakening the g6 square. That's something that is not so easy to see, especially when your position is bad and you have so many things to check. Another conclusion to this is to try to castle as fast as possible. So here, rather than spending 3 moves bringing the queen to b6, capturing on b2, and then moving it back to b6, 3 moves, black would have been better off developing his pieces, the bishop, the knights, castling, and then the game can be played. To summarize all these principles we saw in this chapter, we can summarize them in 3 points. First one is, do not make too many pawn moves in the opening. Second one, do not move your queen too early. And the third one is to castle as fast as possible. And don't waste time with useless moves, of course. And that's the end of this lesson about time in the opening. I hope you've enjoyed it. You can download my iPhone app here on the App Store for free. There are many lessons like this one that you can download. The next videos will be about tactical puzzles. I hope to see you there. Bye bye!